Hi, I'm Pete Chow. You may know me from the RTO Show podcast, but today I'm doing something a little bit different. APRO and Wow Brands have launched a special project to bring the story of our industry to life like never before. They've asked me to sit down with some of the true legends of rent-to-own, capturing their stories, their impact, and their vision for the future. And now I get to share those conversations with you straight from the legends themselves. All of this leads to something groundbreaking, though. A new book, The Rent-to-Own Revolution, A Definitive History of Advocacy and Consumer Access, written by APRO CEO Charles Smitherman and Wow Brands CEO Brian Krast. The book explores the grassroots of RTO, the advocacy that has defined it, and the future that we're building together. Here's where you come in. We're giving away free copies once the book is released. Just head over to the RTOrevolution.com and sign up for a chance to receive a copy in early 2026. Don't miss the chance to be among the first to hold this piece of RTO history. That's RTOrevolution.com. Check it out and become a part of RTO history. Hello and welcome to the RTO Show. I'm your host, Pete Chow, and today I have the honor of talking to another rent-to-own legend. And I can honestly tell you that this one gets me very excited because this is some tenureship that you just see in legend, and that's why we have this legend series. I am here with the legendary Bill Keese, who has done quite a bit in his tenureship with rent-to-own, including the director of APRO for 27 years, 27 amazing years from what I understand, what I'm being told by the other legends. Bill, how are you doing today? How's everything going?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for asking. It's a pretty day here in Galveston.
All right. I love Texas. If I wasn't in Florida, I promise you I would be in Texas.
There you go.
So I got to know, you did 27 years as the executive director of APRO. How did you first hear about the rent-to-own industry, and what put you on that path to becoming the executive director?
Actually, a high school friend of mine was first hired by APRO to be their government relations director, a guy named Ron Waters. He and I went to high school together. We also served in the legislature together. So and kept up all these years. He got the job, and he was telling me that they wanted to hire an executive director and that he wanted the job. But it came about, and I saw it in the paper. I applied, and in not too long of distance, I got a call to be interviewed by the executive committee. It's in the APRO office. They had a office with a common boardroom for everybody. Dick Grell was president. There was Mac Hennigan, Wayne Chambers, Dave Egan, Ted Wilson, and Wayne Chambers, all present. And it was a very nice interview, very good interview. I felt very relaxed, very comfortable around these guys. I thought this was really something that I could be a part of and enjoy for a long time. The one funny part of it is after they quizzed me, they asked me if I had any questions for them. And I said, sure. Is this a financially stable organization? And I should have guessed because they all started looking around at each other. Finally, Ed Wynn said, sure, we have a $1.2 million budget. After I was hired, I found out quickly that we had $700,000 revenue coming in. So it was, that was my first big challenge, is put APRO on a solid financial footing.
So I'm glad you got into that, because we're going to approach that later on. I actually do have a lot of questions on that, because I did find out recently through the other legends that there was some issues that when you came aboard, not anything that you had done, but what you had taken over, because I really want to know some of the approaches that you took. But was this the first time, as you go into this board meeting, you read about this job, is this actually the first time you've heard about rent-to-own and APRO as a whole?
Yes, I didn't know anything about APRO, didn't know APRO existed. I had very little information about rent-to-own. I remember back as a kid hearing some of Chuck Sims' TV and radio ads, and that's about the only exposure I had. So I was coming in blind.
So you said Ron Waters and yourself had gone to high school together, and that you were in the legislature together. Did I hear that right?
Yes. I've had prior to APRO, and one of the questions that the executive committee had was, you seem to have bounced around a lot, Bill. Is that something we should be concerned about? After college, I went to work for the state treasurer's office. After that, I had an opportunity to buy a little restaurant in a small town in central Texas. I moved there with my family, bought this restaurant for the sole purpose of meeting a lot of people in a hurry so I could run for the legislature. My goal had always been to be in politics since I was 7 years old. And this was my opportunity. So I bought this little cafe in Somerville, Texas. And after a year, I announced I was running for election against the incumbent. And there was a former incumbent in the race also at the time. And of course, nobody gave me a snowball's chance to win. But I campaigned them. I touched a nerve and made it in the runoff. And a month later, I beat the incumbent and had no opposition in the fall. So I served 3 terms in the legislature. A wonderful experience. It was just, I still have great friends from that period of time. And look back with fond memories of the battles and the war scars that we had together, and some fun times too. But I was planning on running for state treasurer when my marriage fell apart, and I decided that I wanted to be a part of my daughter's life. We had a legal battle, ending up in a 5-day jury trial, and I won custody of her. So I couldn't do a whole lot in politics with a 4-year-old daughter. But it was great. It was a great honor for me and a great privilege in my life to have a child and raise her as closely as I did. After that, I went to work for Schlossky's as at the home office. I was vice president of franchising for Schlossky's for 5 years. Then a friend of mine from my legislative days was putting in a railroad, luxury passenger railroad from Denver Stapleton Airport to Aspen, Colorado. And he contacted me and asked me if I would run the campaign for him. As time would have it, I decided, living in Aspen might not be too bad. So I took the job, moved to Aspen, and had an unlimited expense account. And I was the voice and the image of the railroad. It was a 6-month battle, and we won the right to pull the railroad in. We won an election both county and in city to allow the railroad to come in. And that was quite an experience, as you can well imagine. After that, I went back to work for the Attorney General's office for a little while in the budgeting department and heard about this opportunity. And I explained this to the group. And that's when Wayne Chambers said, well, you bounced around a lot, and we have concerns about that. And I said, no, I think that gives me great experience to do what you need to have done. They bought my line, and
you know what? That's exactly what I agree with you 100%. Because you had the experience in the legal, when you're talking about the legislator and you're talking about the government, and that's really what APRO does, and that's the role you stepped in. And I think that would say why you did so well for so many years, because you had that experience. Dealing with it.
One of the fun things, my first convention was in Washington, D.C., when APRO was kicking off their federal legislative effort. At the main party, I was supposed to be there, but I had a friend who was the personnel director of George H.W. Bush's White House. And he called me up and said, well, you're in town. Why don't you come have dinner at the White House? So I had to talk to Dick Grau and see if I could have permission to not be at the most important party of the convention and go over to the White House to have dinner. And of course, he agreed that was a very important thing for me to do. So I missed the party, but I established.
Yes, I completely agree. Well, I tell you what, that's quite a story. So make it, and I've got to say, just a little bit of a side note, I have daughters myself, and I can appreciate the fact of understanding what needs to come first. The family is something that you cannot replace, the time you cannot replace, the people you cannot replace. And so I definitely understand making the decision to put that first. And I've got to say from one father to another, I understand your decision, and I'm glad you made it.
Well, thank you. A little bit later, I had the Speaker of the House, Jim Wright, in Congress, Washington, call me up and ask me if I'd run for Congress from that district. He would back me, and he would provide all the financial support for me. But by that time, my daughter was 9 years old, and I said, being in Congress was a lifelong dream, but no thanks. I have to raise my daughter. And she's 50.
Yeah. And I'm sure she's doing wonderful at this point in time.
She is. Great family.
Awesome. So now comes 1989. You see the ad, you go in, you get through this interview, which seems like, when you mention these names, you have an amazing set of names in front of you. $1.2 million budget and a $700,000 income. So now you've got this shortfall. You've got $500,000 is quite a difference. Some of the other legends had mentioned, I think Kevin Quinn had mentioned at a certain point, there was a time when APRO was in trouble. And there were people either backing away or kind of coming out of the idea that maybe APRO wasn't the organization that they needed to be a part of. Yet, it is a striving organization now. What did you do at that time frame? How did you recognize some of the shortfalls that were happening? And what did you do to overcome what was going on at that point in time?
Well, the first thing was overcoming the immediate shortfall. I had to take the budget and cut it. It was not a budget that I put together, but one that I inherited. I had to make the cuts where I thought necessary, rearrange some personnel, brought in some. I had a bookkeeper on full staff. I let her go. I brought in the CPA in the background who would then help me hire an accounting student at UT. And he would fill out some forms for the CPA, and the CPA did it for a third of the cost that the staff was charging me. And, I had to review the bills due every day. There were times when I went a week or two after my pay period for me to get my paycheck. I made sure my staff got paid on time, and I made sure that the important bills were paid. But there was about 6-8 months where we had some vendors calling us up and say, "Well, where's our check?" And they'd jump to the head of the line, top of the mountain there, to get paid. But it was kind of touch and go there for a while. The big thing was, I noticed, you want to review what the membership looks like at first, and who's participating, how many stores they had. We had a dues budget that was based on revenue, but it had a cap of $7,700. And I found that Rent-A-Center had gone public by that time. They had, I think, 1,200 stores. And it came out where they were paying about $35, $36 a store, where the one-store operators are paying $250 a store. And I didn't think that was quite fair. Dave Egan with Rent-A-Center as the general counsel became a good, close friend of mine. I went to him and said, "Dave, y'all have to pony up. You need to pay a little more in dues." He took it to Tom Devlin, and they agreed. So they didn't quite pay the same per store as the one-store operator did, but they knuckled under and paid a lot more money than what they should have. So that got us out of the immediate financial problems. That was in 89 and 90. About that time in 1990, Wayne Chambers had been snooping around the industry and his own books and the federal government, and he called me up and said, "We have a real tax liability problem that could destroy the industry if we don't jump on it and fix it." The IRS could have taxed us for all revenue at one time when we just get a weekly payment in at a time, and our members couldn't pay the dues, the taxes. So I called for a meeting in Atlanta, and the board was there, and we put out a call to every rental dealer in the country to come to it, and most of them did. And Wayne laid out the situation for everybody and said, we need to fix this, and we need to fix this quickly. We started that. We started a fund, a legal and legislative defense fund, and we asked members to contribute to that. And they were very generous. We raised a lot of money each year for that. We had a 2-year jump on the fact that the IRS hadn't seen what Wayne had seen, and we weren't being taxed at the full price. When that came about, it first came about when Henry B. Gonzalez, a congressman from San Antonio, Texas, and chairman of the House Banking Committee, decided that he wanted to have an investigative hearing on the rent-to-own industry. Well, you can imagine that sent shockwaves through the industry. We're being investigated by Congress now. So we had a lobby firm that was representing us, and I didn't think much of them. A guy reached out to me, John Raffaelli, who was the lobbyist, and a young lobbyist starting out. And I met with him. He flew down to Austin. I met with him. And I just had this feeling that he was the right guy. He was hungry. Lobby firm we had were in D.C., and they were the three-piece suit guys, and they had platinum clients, and we needed somebody to fight for us. So I fired our first lobby firm, and then hired John. He led us through a lot of battles, and I attribute a lot of our success to John. When Gonzalez had this hearing, we got there, I testified along with Mamie Harper. And before we got there, I went up to Joseph Kennedy Jr. He was on the committee, and I'd met him I met him during my political life several times. So I went up to him and said, Congressman, I hope we can explain to you what our industry is like, and hope we can get you on our side. He said, Bill, I know the industry, and it's not the transaction. It's you guys have an image problem. And that led to later things, which I'll get to in a little bit. But that hearing went well. We had enough strength on the committee to block Gonzalez's bill. We had a bill in that committee. Gonzalez blocked our bill. And playing defense like that, you consider that a win. That went on a long time. Henry was a dog against us. He just really wanted to get us, but never could get us. Raffaele helped us navigate those terrains real well. And we fought. We organized our legislative conference, annual legislative conference. We sent rental dealers up to Washington to go meet with their members. We covered so many of them because we had such a great turnout of our members. And I always knew that grassroots campaigning is the most effective you can have. So they explained what their business was and how important their business was to their communities, how many people they serve, the benefit to the customer they provide, that the customer has really no other alternative. And we started gaining a lot of sympathy, a lot of trust, and a lot of support in Congress. About the same time, the IRS sent out a notice that they were looking at our transaction from a tax perspective. This was 2 years after Wayne brought it to our industry's attention. Ed and I went to Washington, D.C. to interview a law firm to help us. We had a two-part strategy. One, we were going to pick a rental dealer that had great records and challenge this in the tax court. And the other, but alongside of that, we're going to have a legislative effort where we try to get the legislature, Congress, to declare us a lease for tax purposes, not a sale. That was an interesting dichotomy. Dick Grell was the rental dealer that we selected. He, at that time, had a fairly large, had about 35 stores, and was one of the ones that was really highly computerized at the time, way before most of the rental dealers were computerized. And he had a couple of years' worth of data for him. So he agreed to be audited by the IRS, which was a bold move on his part. And we wouldn't have been successful had not he agreed to do that. That went through the courts. When Ed and I went up to Washington, we looked at several law firms to represent us. And the one that I liked, Ed and I differed at first on this, but I liked Vincent Elkins. They're a big law firm out of Houston. They have offices in D.C. and around the world now. But Judge William Sterrett had just retired as the chief judge of the tax court, the federal tax court. And he was working for Vincent Elkins in Washington. And we had got him to represent us. Who better to represent us than the former Chief Justice? So
you don't get much better than that.
That was an amazing thing. I think Ed came around and saw that this was the right move to make. He had the political connection. And, a lot of people, even today, don't understand the importance of political connections. In anything you do, I used to tell my daughter when she was in grade school, everything is political. And you need to sit in front of the teacher's desk and wear the nice clothes the first couple of weeks and set a tone for it. But when we had Judge Sterrett as our representative against the IRS, and then we had a mountain of grassroots support from our members for our legislative effort. Dick Shelby was a senator of the Senate Finance Committee. We were working on him a lot, a good man, and we raised a lot of money for him. At one point, we had a big fair in Washington, D.C. and gave him some money. We thought it was quite a bit of money. And he said, gosh, folks, I was expecting Brink trucks to pull up here and unload some more money for me. But that didn't happen. But he stuck with us. And we solved the problem. We were almost ready to go to tax court when the IRS commissioner needed $900 million for a new computer system for the IRS. And it just so happens that John Raffaelli's wife worked for the commissioner of the IRS. We knew that from the very beginning. So John's wife accompanied the commissioner of the IRS to Senator Shelby's office. And John prepped Senator Shelby on this. And the commissioner said, Senator, we're in need of $900 million for the computer system. And Shelby leaned back in his desk and said, well, I'll take that under advisement. What are you going to do about the rent-to-own boys? And she said, thought a minute, said, the IRS can issue a rev proc next week saying they're a lease for a rental for tax purposes. So she got her $900 million, and we got a rev proc saying that we were a lease. And
that is amazing.
That was a great time. That was a great celebration by the industry.
What a story. Absolutely. I got to say, John Raffaelli's name has come up several times. And, talking with some of the other legends, I think it was Bill French that said this. Bill was like, it's crazy that we went through what we went through with Henry B. Gonzalez because we've had some meetings and we've had some conventions in the Henry B. Gonzalez building in Texas. So it's just one of those things. It's ironic.
Well,
definitely.
I know at some point, John, if you want a fascinating interview, get John and have him on podcast.
We're going to try to do that. I'm sure that stories he could tell us. So I got a question. You mentioned Ted Wilson coming on around the same time, and you've mentioned him later on. How did Ted Wilson's arrival coincide with yours, and how did you guys work together? How was that dynamic?
Well, it was interesting. When I was first hired, Dick Growell was the president of APRO. I was hired 3 weeks before the convention. By the time convention came about, Ted was being asked by several people to run against Dick for president of APRO, and Ted agreed to it. Now, I didn't know Ted very well by that time, but I'd had 3 weeks with Dick Growell, and Dick had made some great promises to me about my future, and so I stayed out of it, of course, but I was pulling for the best man to win, and Ted Wilson won that year. He was on the search firm that found me. He was secretary, I believe, at the time, or treasurer, one of the two. And so he knew about that, and he decided to run, and Ted did a remarkable job. Ted and I got together to put a road show together, and the two of us traveled around the country talking about APRO. APRO was losing members left and right. There was a battle between APRO and TRIB, and we went down to TRIB's meeting with our hat in our hand and said, we're going to be different. This is going to be a different APRO. We need your support. And we had a dog and pony show we went around the country with. So Ted played a very important role in reestablishing trust and confidence in the association.
So you mentioned what you did to create a different revenue stream or how you affected the finances to change the $700,000 versus the $1.2 million, budget. What were some of the things that you implemented that got people to see APRO in a different light, that got them to come aboard, and you got more people to say, you know what, this is not the APRO that it was. This is a new APRO under this guidance and under this leadership. What were some of the things that you did to say this is where we are now?
Several things. The first thing is my predecessor was not a very personal person, and he stayed in the office and didn't travel very much. I made it a point to travel to every state association meeting, anywhere that rental dealers were meeting. And then I would be there. I would go to corporate headquarters and meet with the management team about APRO. And I told them about my background in legislative efforts and what we accomplish and we can accomplish together. And I told them about some of the things I did innovative in my running this campaign for the railroad, for my restaurant that I had. And, I could talk their language, and we communicated very well. I think they could see in my eyes that I was serious about things and I needed their help. always when you're in trouble, you have to go out and ask for help. And people will respond. Good people will respond if you ask for help. And just made a point to show that helping APRO will help them. That was a big part. We also, I know my first jewelry was coming in at that time as a new rental product. And everybody was hush-hush about it. Dave Egan with the Rental Center, Dave was absolutely opposed to it. He said that'll bring the industry down. There's no way you can say that poor people need jewelry. And we tried to explain to them that it's not just poor people, it's anybody that wants some jewelry for just a little while. So my very first APRO magazine put that as I had a pros and cons of jewelry. I had a jewelry vendor write the pro, be interviewed for the pro, and I had Ed Wynn as the con, because Ed also thought it would be devastating to the industry. And then the cover of the magazine was a green cover with a gold chain wrapped around it as a piece of jewelry in a question mark. And I think that let everybody know that we're willing to take some risk. Rental dealers are notorious for pushing the envelope. And I think prior to that, APRO was kind of not so much there to push the envelope. And I think they found a partner in rent-own through APRO by pushing the envelope. And, I had a personal thing. I told the staff, anytime a rental dealer calls, put them through to me directly. Don't ask, just put them through to me. If I'm not at my desk, find me. I want to talk to them. So I was always available to them. And it's like anything. If you make a personal connection, you're way ahead of the game.
Well, I can tell you right now, I think Charles takes after you. Charles is in every RDA, I think in every gathering that I can think of now. We sometimes make a joke of it, like, where's Waldo? Where's Charles at today?
Yeah.
I've literally seen him go to an event, have to go to another event, and then come back to finish the event that he's at, because I think he's taken a bit of it from you there. You have to be where it's at in the RDAs and the meetings, and, being a part of the rent-own industry doesn't mean being one part of it. It's being one part of it with in association with the others.
As a whole.
And
it's how each part can be a partnership to the whole. And absolutely. I have to say, I'm very impressed with Charles from a distance. Even one of his board members called me up and said, Charles reminds me of you, Bill, when you were young. So I took that as a big compliment. And Charles is doing a hell of a fine job.
So adding these members in was a part of going the trib, laying down these lines of, hey, we're not here to compete in the sense that we're against you, you're against us, we're competing football teams, but we are in this together to make things happen. And in the best interest of rent to own, let's work together and make this happen. So then APRO starts growing again. Trib is doing what it's doing. And then as you're going along, what were some of the big battles besides Henry B. Gonzalez and the IRS? Obviously, one of the biggest battles, because you're not the only one who's mentioned the IRS as one of the trials and tribulations of what happened during those years. But what were some other legal battles, legislative battles that we were able to kind of say and look back on? Bill Keese feels good about this because we did this in the legislature.
Well, we had a program of going and organizing state associations to get state laws passed. And that was a team effort. Ron Waters was my government affairs director. He would do a lot of the traveling. Chris Course with the Rental Center. The Rental Center was very generous in allowing Chris a flexibility to go wherever he's needed. And I would try to rally the troops behind it. So it was a three-way head on there. And, we were very successful. I believe that there were 13 state laws in 1989. Could be off a little bit. And I think we got up to 38 or 39 when I left. And state associations, I formed a state association committee on the board. I had a staff person devoted strictly to the state associations to help them do their programming, their whatever they needed. And we had a lot of legal battles. We had a battle in Pennsylvania. It was a big one. Ernie Preate was the attorney general in Pennsylvania at the time. And he wanted to put the rent-own business out of business. And we finally managed that, but we had a bill that could have passed, but it didn't, to be favorable to the industry. We fought him for many years. But when he did that, I got a call from, it was, gosh, it was a nationally recognized news show. He was on CNN a lot. And he wanted to have a debate, me and on national TV, debating Ernie Preate. And of course, I was certainly willing to do that and certainly prepared to do it. But we decided we needed a PR firm. We hired a PR firm out of Washington, and one of the first things they did, they called up CNN and said, this is not a story. This is not that big a story. You don't want to air this. So they talked this interview from happening, which was a win for us. When you go up against an attorney general saying very bad things about you nationwide, you just don't want that. So we were able to stop it before it took place. That was one. Our PR firm helped out many times. Back when the business started slowing down a little bit in the rent-to-own industry, we still were gathering money for marketing and legislative efforts. And we came up with a program, a PR program for the dealers, for the small dealers. The big guys didn't need it, but small dealers needed it. And Ernie Llewellyn took the lead on this. It was his committee. And we created national commercials that we gave away free to our members. And Richard May on my staff had a childhood friend who was a illustrator, stop motion animation illustrator for Disney. And we got him on the sly to work, and we created this dog, because the dog is friendly and everybody likes dogs, to create this friendly-looking dog. And we made commercials using stop motion animation, which was really difficult. Ernie and Richard and I flew to San Francisco, where the studio was, and we watched him make the commercials, exposed that commercials to our membership, and gave it away free to the small dealers. And that was one of the things that helped them out, get a better image. At that time, some of our rental dealers were running TV ads that showed at a junkyard with a claw grabbing a sofa and raising it up 100 feet in the air and dropping it. And they say, see, our sofas are made to last. Well, that's not the kind of image we wanted. And going back to Joe Kennedy, when he said, you guys have an image problem, that haunted all of us. But we took action on that and at the APRO office. And we worked very hard to explain to everybody our image is so very critical and so very important. The PR effort, the commercials was one phase of that effort.
I mean, I think it definitely worked because, I do remember those days when it was very, very difficult to shake that moniker of, hey, it's not what you think. And there are so many beneficial sides to having rent to own in any community. And it was just always that, that idea like, you guys are loan sharking, you guys are predator lending. And to be able to explain that on any level is huge. I have to agree with you, going back just a hair, with all the state laws that ended up being passed. And I agree with you with those 20 something that came along as you were the executive director in APRO. I talked to Edwin a couple of times, and in Ed's mind, those were the wins that really made the difference, because maybe not so much having something on a federal level. He doesn't think that that's actual win, but having it on the state level in as many states as we do, the way it was done, that was really the win for APRO as far as legality, getting it passed in as many states as you had, especially at that time and then going forward, because those laws allowed each and individual state, because, states are like people. They're all the same, but they're different. And so, you have the ability to tweak it to what your constituents need, what the people in your state really want, but still be able to present it as a win for the rent-to-own industry. Do you feel like the state wins was a better win than maybe getting a federal law passed?
Well, I agree that they were crucial for us getting a legal operating environment for us. But you have to realize there's the large companies, and around this time, there started a large consolidation effort by certain people. At one point, we had, I think, 7 publicly traded companies and fewer companies with more and more stores. They were buying up rental dealers all over the place, and they were multi-state. Well, it's costly and sometimes very, very difficult to train your people into, 18 different laws they have to follow if you have stores in 18 different states. So the idea of trying to get a federal bill was this overreaching thing that said maybe we can consolidate the laws and so that it might make it easier for the large companies to function and make it easier for everybody. But as it turns out, we were able to get a federal bill passed in the House, one Congress, but not in the Senate. We get it the next time we get it passed in the Senate, but not in the House. So it was, when I left, it was a 20-year effort that was not very successful, but it spun off a lot of success.
Well, I think that's the way you got to look at it, right? Not all losses are losses. All losses are teachers and implementations on how to do things differently and how to get it right another way. And I agree that, seeing it from a fragmented point of a lot of states versus a one large company could be difficult. I think there's something to be said on both sides of that. But I do understand what you're saying about having one large company having several different ways to interact, teach, train, and implement their processes through state lines. So I can definitely get that.
After consolidation, one of the things I noticed in the association world, a lot of industries will come about, and when consolidation starts taking place, the bigger companies come to a point where they don't think that the trade association is that valuable to them. So we had to make sure that we were helping out our one-store operators and giving them value, but also giving Rent-A-Center and Aaron's the value that they were looking for to stay in the association. Because APRO couldn't exist, and a lot of associations have gone under because they lose the big guys once they get to a certain point, and they don't think the association is valuable anymore. So that was always the back of my mind. You have to keep everybody
I completely
together.
agree. Now, so the federal bill, whether it went through or not, that was one of the biggest, that was on the biggest stage. And it could have fundamentally changed the way rent to own went left, right, north, south. It would have made a change whether it did or it didn't. What were some other huge things that could have changed the way RTO was implemented? And, we either got passed or we didn't get passed. But was there anything else in your time frame that would have made a huge difference in the way RTO interacted as a whole, or there was something that got passed?
Federally, there's, the two big issues that affect everybody was the regulatory issue and the tax issue. And we got that behind us in the early 90s, basically. So after that, there were some areas that we wanted to tweak when the Consumer Financial Protection Agency was being created. It turns out that Elizabeth Warren had gotten elected to the Senate, and she was pushing this. Well, she used to be Ed Wynn's next door neighbor. The consequences, the ironies about this thing is just incredible. But we had more insight to Elizabeth Warren when we were doing that. So we had to gear up to make sure that once that entity was created, that they wouldn't turn the power of that federal agency against us. And we kept a very close eye in Washington legislatively on keeping that intact, keeping them arm's length from us.
Well, that didn't end. I don't think it ended then either. I remember not this past year, but the year before. Maybe it was this past year, but it was the year before. I remember being at LegCon, and one of the messages that we wanted to pass through our bodies, our legislative bodies in DC, was that, we kind of want to stay away from the CFPB and remind them that we are not credit. It's not a credit situation, and we'd like to leave it the way it's been set up state by state. This is not a credit transaction. And if you change it that way, there are businesses, there are people, there are lives, there are careers, there are owners, taxpayers, and there are community members, our clients, that will be affected by that. And we didn't want to have that issue. So, I think it's always come up one way or another over these years.
Absolutely. No matter whether you get a law or not, the law can always be changed. So you have to have eternal vigilance in the governmental bodies that regulate you. So, I'm very happy to see, I went on the website today and see photos from the last legislative conference and the legislative conference scheduled for next year. We should never let that go. When we do that, that'll start the end of our industry. But
I got to say,
that's an ongoing battle, and it should be fought every year.
Absolutely. I was going to say, they started this fellows program where they have certain companies and entities trying to bring new and fresh people to the legislative conference in DC to get them to see what it is like to advocate for their industry. Actually, I'm going to do my best, and I haven't worked it out with APRO fully yet, but I want the podcast, whether it becomes part of the Fellows program or whether I do it on the side, my goal is to also bring somebody from the rent-to-own industry along with me as I do that. So I want to join the Fellows program and bring somebody along because that's how much I believe and making sure that they see how important it is to advocate. And I love the idea because, and I've said it before, and I'll probably say it 100 times again, it's different when you have all of these companies come together under one flag to advocate for their business in their state and say that, we are doing the right thing by our people, by our communities, and we want to stay doing what we're doing, and we'd love your support to do that. I think it's one of the best things that I've ever seen in any industry do over these timeframes. And, something you mentioned, talking about different people and different things, you mentioned that there were other groups, other agencies, other organizations that didn't make it. What were some of the organizations that APRO partnered with along the years that helped achieve some of the goals that we were trying to do? And who were the ones that didn't make it?
I think in general, anytime a new product is introduced, you really have to get to know the product and the association that represents that product. I remember I mentioned Julia earlier. Came on, it was very big in the industry for a while. It's not so big anymore if they even exist. But furniture, when I first came on board, nobody had furniture in the stores. That was a revolutionary idea back in my day to bring furniture in. We can't do it because our stores aren't big enough for it. It's too cumbersome. How can we store enough to be able to deliver on time? And you work with the industries, the furniture industries representatives to help you figure out how to do it in your association and your membership. So nothing is in a vacuum. You have to realize, I think, that everything in life is how you connect with people, how you connect with organizations and find commonality and find common ground. And that's what APRO is all about, and it always has been.
I can tell you I've only been doing this for now, it will be coming up 21 years. I still don't have, even though you've been out of it for a while, I still haven't gotten to your point, your level of experience in this. And some of the things that you mentioned, I love being able to kind of go over these things and kind of talk about it. Going back a little bit, because we did talk about the IRS and their ability to kind of put a really big damper on things and how we eventually overcame that. How damaging was that? I mean, with the IRS situation and it looming, would we have lost the industry at that point in time?
The industry would have changed. When I was testifying for Congress for Henry B. Gonzalez, and I was rehearsing with Dave and Chris Course and all those people and Ed, I told them, what I want to say is, guys, hit us with your best shot because we can always come back because we're a very energetic, we're a very flexible industry. And we're not concerned, we're not worried about you. And I'd say that's part of it is that, we not had the IRS said we were a sale, that would have meant that we would have had to collect taxes on the entire price of the item, even though we're only getting a weekly or monthly payment of it. So the cash flow would have been totally upside down for all the rental dealers. And that would have sent many of them out of business. And I don't think it could have been a profitable business for anybody if that happened.
I can only imagine how different the landscape would look in rent to own.
Yeah. But I'm sure that the people, going back to Chuck Sims and Barry Gambini and Bud Holliday, they taught the industry, they founded this industry. And one of the most important messages they gave the industry is to be flexible and be nimble and overcome obstacles and don't let anything cut you down. And I had total faith that this industry would survive no matter what.
Well, I can tell you right now, there's a lot of pioneers, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that have a lot of grit. And I've learned to use that word sparingly because it means a lot more to me now than it did earlier in my life, that they have the grit to keep on and being, to persevere in these times. It's funny, you mentioned furniture. I've only been doing it 21 years and we had furniture the day one that I started. I could not imagine this industry without furniture, and it's crazy you say that. So, looking backward also allows us to look forward. you've gone through a lot of, you were in it in 4 different decades, in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. You have seen a lot. Bill Keese, you've done a lot. Let me ask you a question, Bill. If you were to take a snapshot today, and this is your opinion, looking forward, what is something that you can see in the future of rent to own, or maybe even in the future of APRO?
First of all, the future's bright. There will always be a demand for the rent to own concept. It may be called something else. Throughout the years, we tried different names: rental purchase, lease purchase, whatever, to try to avoid the stigma of rent to own. We finally agreed that, let's just face up to it, call it rent to own, and be proud of it. But the people behind it in this industry, and I've seen 3 generations come in this industry. Every generation passes that grit, passes that innovation, passes that desire to improvise, passes that creativity to the next generation. And that is something that I think we can attribute to Chuck Sims, Barry Gambini, and Bud Holiday. They taught us. They gave us that DNA. And my 27 years is interesting. I saw a lot of valleys and mountaintops in the industry, and so that confirms my thinking that this industry will go on as long as people want to do it. Leaders want to be there, and as long as there are customers for it. And I can't see there be a time without that.
So you left in 2015 as the executive director of APRO. What are you doing now, Bill? What has been captivating you for the last 10 years?
Well, I left in 2016.
2016.
My wife is an architect, and the house we had in Austin, spent 28 months remodeling it to be something spectacular. And that took the year, actually 2 years, my last year at APRO and the year that I was retired, to finish that project. And today, an actor by the name of Glenn Powell lives in that house. He bought the house
no
for
kidding.
$4.5 million. Yeah, he bought the house for $4.5 million. We didn't.
No kidding.
He didn't buy
Wow.
it, but Glenn Powell bought that house. But I traveled so much in those 27 years, being on a plane all the time, being on the phone when I'm not on a plane. I get calls, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, a lot of times. And I had to decompress. So we moved to Galveston, bought a 1903 Victorian house. And that was in 2018. And we've been 2017, and we've been working on it ever since then. So I do a lot of tinkering around the house. Old houses need a lot of fixing up. So I've become a master carpenter, a master plumber, and it's good because one thing in my life with APRO is hard to see the end of a project. I never did see the end of the federal effort. I did see the end of the tax problem, and rarely can you see the end of a project when you're in as executive director of an association, because there's always things moving around. So I wanted to do something that I could see the beginning and the end of it. And the middle wasn't that large. My first year back in Galveston, I decided that the Galveston needed new leadership. So I ran for mayor of Galveston. People thought I was crazy. I've had some help from some real dealers, but mostly self-funded. And I didn't win, but I established a name here in Galveston. I can still, go to the grocery store and people come up to me I don't know and ask and say, "Are you Bill Keese?" So that allowed us to integrate very quickly into the life of Galveston Island. When you run for mayor, and it was a long campaign because of the pandemic. But I keep busy. I'm a member of a couple of clubs. I was president of the Rotary Club here in Galveston last year. I have been a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I was on the legislative advocacy committee. I have a couple of coffee clubs I'm a member of. We sit as old men. We sit with a lot of experience. We sit there and solve all the problems of the world. We don't have to make a mistake because what we say doesn't mean anything, but it's fun for us old guys.
Bill, I got to say, you have lived a life. I am in awe of some of the things that you've been able to accomplish, both young and at your age now. I mean, it's amazing to say. Um, you know, Coming to a close with all the all the knowledge, all the experience, all the time that you spent doing the things that you've done. Looking back, what is some advice you would give some young rent-to-own entrepreneurs as they're coming up through the ranks these days and looking forward to putting their roots down and kind of growing into this industry? What would the great Bill Keese say is, if I could give you a little bit of knowledge, just a little chunk of knowledge here, what would that be?
I am going to say what I practiced when I was executive director. I made a point of reinventing myself every 5 years. I think that's why I lasted 27 years. I took a different outlook. I purposely would scrub my mind and think of something different to do with APRO every 5 years. I say for any entrepreneur, have the same kind of system. Oh, don't be afraid of change. Please look toward reinventing yourself, your companies, your products, the way you do business. Never be stagnant. And I got that from my father. He was a man who embraced change, and he instilled me with that. And I'd say embrace change and don't get stuck in the past.
I got to say, great words from the great Bill Keese. Thank you so much for being on the show. I could just only imagine what it would have been like for the 27 years as executive director for APRO and all the things that you've done and all the things that you have been able to accomplish in that time frame. Thank you so much from myself in the RTO industry. And I will tell you guys, thank you so much for visiting the RTO show and being a part of our story today and listening to what Bill has to say. If you want more, feel free to hit us up. You can hit me up on my email at pete@thertoshowpodcast.com, or you can go online and see some of the things that I've been able to get into and what's going on at www.thertoshowpodcast.com. You can also hit us up on social media. We have Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube where you're going to see this. So make sure you stop by and subscribe. Make sure you go to the website, buy some swag. Bill, I really appreciate you being here today. It's just been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. And I will tell you guys, as always, I appreciate you. Make sure you get your collections low to get your sales high. Have a great one. Hey everyone, it's Pete Chow here from the RTO Show podcast, and I want to tell you about a company that's making a real difference in the rent-to-own space. Wow Brands. I've seen firsthand how they approach marketing. And let me tell you, it's not just about ads. Wow Brands builds complete digital ecosystems designed specifically for the rent-to-own industry. Their e-commerce and lead generation strategies are built to bring in qualified leads. And did I mention that they are actively working with the rent-to-own industry while also being members of APRO and TRIB? Listen, these folks are passionate problem solvers. They don't just slap something together. They design, build, and scale the kind of digital retail tools your business needs and your customers actually want. So if you're serious about growing, reach out to Wow Brands at wowbrands.com. I trust them, and I think you will too.